Shadow Hack. Chapter 641, Lucky Wind City's Crisis. Li Dai, at that moment, was the only person overseeing the defense of Lucky Wind City. Lin Yuero had left for the mythical realm, Li Tian had gone to another position, while Li Feng and Li Yun also had their respective assignments. Only Li Dai was arranged to stay in Lucky Wind City to defend it. Others have gone to finish different assignments, so I can only envy them while staying in the city. Hi, why is the city lord ignoring my abilities? What good is there in defending Lucky Wind City? Is it possible that those guys would still dare to attack? Aren't they afraid of the formidable supreme transcending level experts? The head of vampires had arrived in Lucky Wind City and said with a laugh, Li Dai, you're working so hard to defend the city. Do you want to have a cup or two with us? This. Li Dai was slightly startled. He was still overseeing the city's defense, so if he began to drink wine, how would he protect the city? What are you afraid of? Lucky Wind City is invulnerable, so would anyone dare to attack it? You forgot that those people from other planes have been captured by the city lord, which has served as a way to make the other powers cower in front of our military force. Don't be afraid, older brother guarantees that there definitely won't be any mishap. Looking at the head of vampires being so cordial, Li Dai couldn't decline and took the cup of wine. He then drank it together with the head of vampires. The area surrounding Lucky Wind City was extremely calm, while inside the city, everyone was celebrating peace with songs and dance. Li Dai became somewhat excited because of drinking and continued to drink and chat merrily, even calling over some dancers to perform. The entire Lucky Wind City were very lively, but not because soldiers were assembling but because of indulgence in drinking. And in the surroundings, the fluxers from Frontline Heavens and Divine Religion were lying in ambush. They seemed to have accumulated enough power to be in action at any moment. But inside Lucky Wind City, no one had any idea that the enemy was waiting for the opportunity to wipe them out in one move. After all, they had obtained an important piece of information that Lin Yuero wasn't in the city but had left with some supreme transcending experts. This was simply a God-sent gift for the enemy. It provided them with the best opportunity to launch a large-scale attack on Lucky Wind City. How could they miss such a chance? Frontline Heaven's frontline god seemed to have a plan in line and slowly said to the Pope, this time, we will capture Lucky Wind City in an instant. My spy has informed me that the city is busy singing and dancing, bustling with noise. So how could such protectors defend against our large-scale attack? The Pope began to laugh heartily. Good. I hadn't expected that the person defending the city would be such an idiot. We will make our move at night, which is the best time to remove evil. After being suppressed by that guy Li Yunmu for so long, all my pent-up frustrations will finally be vented. Frontline God drank some tea and said with a slight smile, be calm. After tonight is successful, the power structure in Earth will undergo another enormous change. Ha 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 ha. Frontline God, this is all because of your intelligence. Henceforth, my divine religion will officially form an alliance with Frontline Heavens. That is only natural. We will divide the territory of Lucky Wind City, and our two factions' territories on Earth will increase a few times. How could that little girl of Lucky Wind City be our opponent? She is far inferior to Li Yunmu. The Pope continued to laugh. That's right. Frontline God, your strategies are definitely above those of that girl. Far away in the origin world, Li Yunmu was completely unaware of the impending crisis. He was still in the land of ice in front of all gods of Scandinavia requesting to stop the wedding. His actions had enraged many gods of Scandinavia. The situation was also extremely embarrassing for Odin. As for the day's main character Brunhilde, she was even more unable to believe Li Yunmu's words. Both of them had clearly pledged undying love to each other, so why did the mortal suddenly go back on his word? Couldn't it be because she wasn't sufficiently feminine? If this was the reason, then she could change herself. Why was he causing her to lose face in front of the entire Scandinavia? I hope thou can provide me sufficient explanation, Odin demanded. I will give the explanation. Old bastard. Our goal in the origin world is the secret genetic code. And presently, that secret genetic code is located inside Heavenly God's Council's old nest, Whale City. You should know the importance of the secret genetic code for the origin world? Would this suffice as an explanation? Odin's complexion changed quickly. As an ancient god, he was very clear about the secret genetic code which the being residing in Li Yunmu's body spoke of. It was something that controlled the fate of all humans and heavenly gods. If someone could decipher it, the aftermath would be too horrible to imagine. They could use the newly gained knowledge to create gods, which would throw the entire origin world into chaos. Therefore, while the Heavenly Gods Council is attacking, we must go to Whale City and get our hands on that secret genetic code. I created that toy, so it's about time it was returned to its rightful owner. Odin's complexion changed again. What are thou saying? Heavenly Gods Council is attacking? Right now? Why haven't I received any information about this attack? The system sneered at him. Ask that question of your beloved Loki. Why did he suddenly betray Scandinavia and rush off to turn traitor on the day of his sister Brunhilde's marriage? Odin's complexion went unsightly. Loki's action not only made him lose face as a father, it also made it difficult for him to raise his head before the system. In the past, he had made a solemn vow that he would use Scandinavia's full strength to assist the system. But now, that vow seemed to have become a joke. Just a moment ago, he had been conducting a grand marriage when he encountered betrayal from the rear. Odin's complexion turned grave, and he gloomily declared to everyone, the marriage has been cancelled for the time being. My Scandinavians, prepare for war. Hearing Odin's command, everyone was overwhelmed with shock. What did Odin say just then? Prepare for battle? What exactly was happening? No one refuted Odin's command, but Brunhilde was stunned. She instantly asked Li Yunmu what exactly was going on. He was silent for a moment before saying, your elder brother Loki betrayed Scandinavia, and the Heavenly Gods Council's army is advancing toward us. Brunhilde was slightly startled, but soon, the intimidating long spear appeared in her hand, and she said while gnashing her teeth, if this is true, I will definitely not forgive him easily. He not only destroyed my marriage, but even betrayed Scandinavia. Who was it that humiliated Scandinavia in the end? Li Yunmu's voice was apologetic when he spoke next. I am sorry, Brunhilde kissed his cheek and said, I know that everything you do is for us, for Scandinavia. Even if only half of the wedding has been conducted, in my heart, you are already my husband. Chapter 642, Are you angry, system? Brunhilde's words somewhat moved Li Yunmu. During the time he had been in contact with her, he had felt happy and pleased and actually had very few restrictions and fetters. As the army of Heavenly Gods Council was about to arrive at Asgard, the numerous Scandinavia gods entered battle mode. The system inside Li Yunmu's body urged him, what are you still waiting for? Why not quickly rush out of Asgard? But Li Yunmu remained unconcerned like before and said to Brunhilde, I will remain behind and battle with you all. The system almost went crazy from anger and furiously said, smelly youngster. Are you trying to swindle me? Have you forgotten our goal? For a lover, are you going to risk the safety of the entire origin world? When Brunhilde heard Li Yunmu's words, her lips bent to form an arc. She pressed her thin lips on his thick ones, and at that instant, the long spear in her hand began to glow with golden light as if shedding its original skin and becoming extraordinarily more formidable. You both. The system was somewhat anxious. It was the best opportunity for him to obtain the secret genetic code, but Li Yunmu was actually intending to renounce it, which was both unbearable and understandable at the same time. Do you know the importance of the secret genetic code or not? The system was already panting from rage. Then why don't you have Odin go to Whale City to fight for the code? There's no need for us to personally obtain it, is there? Moreover, we can find another opportunity to obtain the secret genetic code, but if I lose this wife of mine, I won't be able to meet her again. You smelly youngster! You! The system was about to spit blood. Li Yunmu was its host, so if he wasn't willing, how could the system control his actions? Unless it occupied Li Yunmu's consciousness, but once this body become only a carapace, it might not be able to continue residing in it. This was an extremely risky choice, which the system didn't want to use unless as a last resort. In front of Scandinavia, the waves of figures from Heavenly Gods' Council descended. They were densely concentrated like a layer of clouds looking down on the entire Asgard. Aries, Apollo, Athena as well as other ancient gods of Heavenly Gods' Council had gathered in the land of ice. All of them had come to obtain justice in place of Hades and undoubtedly wanted to make Scandinavia pay the price of blood. How could Odin possibly leave for Heavenly Gods' Council's old nest Whale City at such a time? If he left, it would be equivalent to Scandinavia losing its backbone, so he definitely couldn't leave. Odin led the numerous Scandinavian gods took a step forward and said in a profound tone, "All respected heavenly gods have honored Asgard with their presence, how may I help you?" Zeus replied with a solemn expression, "You Scandinavians injured my little brother Hades. We shall settle the debt." Hearing Hades' question, Odin suddenly looked at him gloomily. "Where is my unfilial son Loki?" "Odin, I am here." Suddenly Loki appeared in front of Odin and said in a chilly tone with some bloodthirst in his eyes, "You have disgraced Scandinavia and have become unsuitable to continue as its king. Obediently hand over Scandinavia to me. Thou unfilial son! You think that I don't know that I was picked up by you and am not your own child? In the future, either Scandinavia will belong to the mortal or that useless son of yours Thor." When Thor saw Loki's betrayal, he was instantly enraged and bellowed, "Loki! You surprisingly dared to betray Scandinavia. We will never forgive you." He raised his thunder god's hammer and madly rushed toward Loki. He was unable to endure someone betraying Scandinavia. In his eyes, his sister marrying a mortal wasn't a betrayal to Scandinavia, but selling Scandinavia for one's own benefit like Loki had was the true disgrace. Loki retreated a few steps while sneering at Thor. "Haha, you're someone whose muscles have developed, but the brain hasn't. If you weren't insistent on choosing that mortal, Scandinavia wouldn't have sunk to its present state. You useless trash!" Thor's eyes almost bulged out of their sockets. He didn't care about the Heavenly Gods' Council's people and only wanted to teach a lesson to his father's unfilial son. Otherwise, it would be disastrous. Odin's expression was grave, but when he saw Thor personally dealing with Loki, he was quite relieved. His gaze then focused on Zeus. He was leading 7 ancient gods of the 12 master gods of Western country. But in the origin world, they were all praised as master gods. In Odin's eyes, they were at the same level as him. Odin took a deep breath, hoping that the being inside Li Yunmu's body would hurry up and find the secret genetic code. He could only obstruct the group of Heavenly Gods' Council for some time. Thor and Loki were busy fighting with each other, but Heavenly Gods' Council and Scandinavian God Council were indifferent about that. They were still watching each other while a battle was on the verge of erupting between them. Zeus suddenly lifted Odin's scepter and coldly said, "Your Scandinavia's scepter is already in my hand. What do you have to say about that?" "Odin." Odin's complexion suddenly changed, and his gaze became much more profound. The unfilial son Loki had stolen his scepter, Scandinavia's supreme glory. The Scandinavian God Council also began to panic. Without his scepter, how could Odin protect them from annihilation? Loki wasn't exactly Scandinavian. Why did he betray Scandinavia? What exactly was the benefit of betraying Scandinavia for him? "You obedient son gave it to me. In order to become this country's king, he didn't hesitate to use any method. And I only want to assist him," Zeus said solemnly. Odin turned silent, looking at the scepter in Zeus' hands. He seemed to have the pride of Scandinavia. "What can we do now?" What should our Scandinavia do? What to do? Will we really have to surrender to Heavenly God's counsel? The Scandinavian God Council began to panic and made one suggestion after another. While the scene was in complete chaos, Brunhilde's long spear suddenly issued a clang sound and fell in front of Zeus' leg. The god's complexion abruptly changed. War god Aries, who was standing behind him, also looked at the long spear, and his gaze turned profound and unfathomable. If someone truly dared to get close to Zeus, he would definitely tear them to shreds. Brunhilde appeared on the scene, lifted her head, and sneered at everyone coldly. What gave you the courage to look disdainfully on our Scandinavia's prestige? Taking unfair advantage of Scandinavia being undefended. Chapter 643, 2 Dimensions. What should we do? City Lord, we cannot detect the enemy. We are being played by that old man. The supreme transcending level experts led by Linuero were all biting their teeth. Not only did they have to evade the numerous arrows, but also pay attention to the enemy's position. Regardless of which direction they chose, they were unable to discover the enemy's tracks. Linuero had just confirmed with Illusion God that it wasn't any invisible enemy. She wasn't clear about whether there were any hidden mechanisms or not, but she thought of an even more reasonable explanation at that moment. 2 dimensions. Linuero finally found the crux of the problem. The reason why they couldn't detect the enemy was because the enemy was in another dimension, so naturally they wouldn't be detected. But the enemy's actions were synchronized, so possibly there was an informant in this dimension which was guiding the actions of the enemy in the other dimension. And what they had to do was to dig out that informant to survive. Linuero raised the corner of her mouth into a smile and said complacently to the illusion god of the mythical realm, "Many thanks to Senior's reminder which allowed the youngster to see through the secret of the third layer." The illusion god's expression suddenly changed. The girl truly didn't disappoint him and found the crucial detail of the third layer. If they could find the informant in this dimension or perhaps shatter the whole place and find the enemy in the other dimension, it would be equivalent to proceeding into the next layer of the mythical realm. Linuero pondered it for a moment, then said, "If you tried to shatter this dimension, how long would it take?" "City Lord, this isn't difficult for us, supreme transcending level experts." "But are you certain that there are 2 dimensions?" one of the supreme transcending level experts said. "There isn't any other explanation. If we tried to find the informant in this dimension, it wouldn't be easy. It is better to break this dimension which will allow you to see the enemy. Clearing this layer will become quite easy for you." Once Linuero finished speaking, the supreme transcending level expert began to store energy, and then with a loud howl, shattered the dimension. Bang! Like a mirror had been struck, cracks appeared in space. Right after, enemies shooting the arrows appeared in the field of view of the supreme transcending level experts. They were extremely shocked. The city lord's words had been true, but all of it had been just a guess, so wasn't it too incredulous? The strength of the enemies shooting the arrows wasn't very formidable, and they were unable to withstand a single blow from the supreme transcending level experts. The illusion god's complexion turned increasingly more unsightly. None of the people who had entered the mythical realm before were able to reach the 4th layer. Only this girl, relying on her astonishing perception and terrifying intelligence, had managed to reach it. Linuero's cupped her hands and said with a slight smile to the silent illusion god, "Senior, thanks for letting me win." The scene in the mythical realm changed again as they entered the 4th layer. It should be more difficult, right? Linuero began to think so, since otherwise the mythical realm would simply be too weak. This time, the mythical realm didn't disappoint her. They were surrounded by a magma hell and an ice hell. Between the two of them, there was a bridge. A senior was sitting on it with eyes closed. This should be the main boss of the 4th layer? But there was still lava and snow present everywhere. If anyone fell down the bridge, they would experience either the power of ice or magma. When the supreme transcending experts saw the terrifying environment, their eyes turned somewhat dim. Clearly, this was the stage for a fierce battle, and only one of them would escape alive. They had cleared the first 3 layers by relying on Lin Yuero's intelligence. However, the 4th layer would test their true strength. Without sufficient strength, they would remain trapped eternally in this layer and would be forced to endure the torment of heat and cold. The illusion god wouldn't let them off easily. Illusion god's voice echoed again then. Ha 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 girl, your performance in the past 3 realms have left me very satisfied. I think that you are a rare talent. Unfortunately, you won't be able to clear all 5 layers. Every layer of mythical realms tests a special characteristic. Will you be able to think of the weak point of this layer? Illusion god's words enlightened Lin Yuero. Wasn't this a hint for her? In the beginning, her analysis was the same as everyone else's, believing that this layer would test everyone's genuine strength and using the tricks from previous levels would probably be completely ineffective here. One of you should try this stumbling block's strength, she commanded at first. I will go, one of the supreme transcending level experts volunteered. He flexed his muscles and suddenly advanced toward the bridge. Even when the senior with his eyes closed sensed the supreme transcending expert nearing him, he didn't shrink back and stayed with his eyes closed. The supreme transcending level expert's fist almost touched the scalp of the senior, but the old man still didn't move. He only used his hand to resist the supreme transcending level expert's punch and ruthlessly threw him on the ground. The supreme transcending level expert did a few somersaults and gasped for air. He then reported, "This person is very formidable. I feel that he didn't even use his full strength yet. He can easily defeat us." After hearing the supreme transcending level expert's report, Lin Yuero sank into contemplation. The first layer tested their courage and insight, the second layer tested their survival instinct, and the third layer tested their intelligence. So what exactly did the 4th layer test? Someone exchange with him. Advance and retreat, depending on the situation. After Lin Yuero's command, a few more supreme transcending level experts began to exchange blows with the senior on the bridge. But no one was able to defeat him, and they were all defeated in one move. The bridge was extremely narrow, so Lin Yuero didn't dare to test whether everyone could attack together. Otherwise, if they fell into lava or snow, she wouldn't be able to give any explanation to Li Yunmu. These were all elites whom he had nurtured with extreme care. If there was the slightest accident with any of them, he would be greatly pained. Lin Yuero took a deep breath and said, "Then I will try to test him." "City Lord, it is very dangerous, you cannot go. You are our lucky Wind City's hope, you cannot go." Lin Yuero shook her head and said, "Only when I exchange blows with him will I be able to discover his weak point. Otherwise, we will be stuck in this realm for all time." Chapter 644, Valkyrie vs Goddess of War and Wisdom. Brunhilde's appearance caused the morale of Scandinavia to swell, and the Scandinavian God Council excitedly cheered. "Our Valkyrie has appeared. Scandinavia's hope has arrived." Brunhilde pulled back her long spear and pointed it at Zeus. "Your heavenly God's Council is being an intolerable bully. In the past, our Scandinavia and your heavenly God's Council never crossed paths, but not only did you dispatch Hades to attack my father, now you have come to disturb the peace of my Scandinavia. As a Valkyrie, I won't allow you to infringe upon even an iota of Scandinavia." Brunhilde's words resounded powerfully and caused the blood of Scandinavians to boil as if they had found their country's only hope. Zeus clenched his teeth and coldly said, "If you are willing to hand over the person who injured Hades, our heavenly God's Council won't look into how Scandinavia was involved. Quickly, hand over that mortal to me." "Humph. He is already my husband and a Scandinavian, so why should we hand him over to you?" Brunhilde said with a glare. "So that mortal turns out to be a coward. After making a mistake, he can only hide behind another. Does he not even dare to accept responsibility? Furthermore, he still needs a woman to take the blame in his place." Poseidon ridiculed. Hearing someone ridiculing him, Li Yunmu leisurely appeared in front of Scandinavian God Council and Heavenly Gods Council. Hades was indeed injured by me. But I don't remember how I did it. You injured Odin, and I injured H.A.C.K, which is completely fair. It would be better if you gave me face and handed over the secret genetic code. I would then be willing to forget this matter. What do you say? If you don't agree to hand over the secret genetic code, it's fine as well. Since I could wound Hades, then you Zeus aren't worthy of entering my eyes either. After Li Yunmu finished speaking, he fell back a step. He couldn't help but crease his eyebrows and furiously say inside his head, "You old bastard! Are you playing me again?" Clearly, the words said to Zeus a moment ago did not belong to Li Yunmu. Although he had chosen to remain, he wasn't willing to directly clash with the people of Heavenly God's Council who were pushing forward with overbearing momentum. He also wasn't certain that he could defeat them. Thus, he had decided to watch the situation before acting. If he chose to fight, it would at best be by providing assistance to someone. He thus hadn't expected that the system would use his mouth to say some reckless words. Odin was stunned. He clearly remembered that the being residing in Li Yunmu's body had said that they would proceed towards Whale City to steal the secret genetic code, so why were they still in Scandinavia? Could it be? The thought moved Odin. Perhaps they were concerned about Scandinavia's safety and had chosen to remain behind? After all, there was a vast difference between the strength of Scandinavia and Heavenly God's Council. If Brunhilde hadn't awakened the enormous might of her long spear, they wouldn't even have ability to resist. All the gods of Scandinavian God Council were dumbstruck. Why was the mortal who had just recently joined Scandinavia being so savage? Moreover, he also said that he had injured Hades. All the gods sucked in a sharp breath, all of them were very clear about Hades' strength. If the mortal was able to heavily injure Hades, his strength was certainly impressive. No wonder Odin had allowed him to join Scandinavia. It seemed that he had cared about Li Yunmu's strength from the start. If he truly possessed such terrifying power, he would indeed be suitable for their Scandinavia's Valkyrie. When the gods of Heavenly God's Council heard Li Yunmu's words, they were immediately enraged. Their gazes became increasingly more ruthless, for they felt as if their divine prestige was being trampled upon by a mortal. If it had been anyone else, then they would have been immediately torn limb from limb. But the mortal in front of them wasn't any ordinary mortal. He could injure Hades, so his strength couldn't be underestimated. A formidable pressure was immediately emitted from the furious Zeus, who roared in anger. "Mortal! The only reason you can be so arrogant is because of that being in your body, right? Humph! I will soon peel him away from your skin, then you won't be any different from a normal mortal, unable to withstand even a single blow from me." Zeus then began to circulate the power inside his body, desiring to strike Li Yunmu. But Brunhilde used her long spear to bar the path in front of Li Yunmu. "None of you should think of harming even a hair on my husband's head." The long spear was thrust forward and released an enormous energy fluctuation which stunned the Heavenly God's Council's numerous gods. When had her long spear become so formidable? The Valkyrie didn't possess such tyrannical strength previously. With Brunhilde blocking the path to Li Yunmu, a god from Heavenly God's Council stepped forward. She looked beautiful and had fair and glossy skin, tender red lips, which made her seem like an extremely gentle person. "Father, let me fight her." Athena took the initiative, which settled Zeus' anger for the time being, and he indifferently asked, "Are you certain?" "How can I know without trying?" Zeus was only afraid of the long spear in Brunhilde's hand, which was still soaring in strength. If not for it, he wouldn't need to be concerned about anything. But the long spear's might left him anxious. Athena was the goddess of war and wisdom in the Heavenly God's Council. She was holding a sword and shield and had a gentle complexion, but her heart was full of killing intent. And Brunhilde's provocation just then had filled her with desire to battle the enemy. The battle between Thor and Loki on Scandinavia's side still hadn't stopped, but the battle between Brunhilde and Athena, two goddesses, was on the verge of starting. Li Yunmu was thinking of warning Brunhilde when the system used his mouth once again. "Zeus, what are you thinking about?" Are you willing to hand over the secret genetic code? If you aren't, then none of your heavenly God's council should think about returning alive. After those words, Li Yunmu sensed his body suddenly being occupied. Abominable! The damned system, what was it planning to do this time? Gradually a ball of black chi appeared in his eyes. The system hadn't forcefully occupied his body, but because of sensing great danger, it had automatically unleashed Li Yunmu's most optimum battle state based on his current strength. At that moment, without the assistance of the dark state, Li Yunmu couldn't even confront a half-step god, let alone an ancient god. And right then, all of the heavenly gods' council had arrived with their myriad of ancient gods. If Li Yunmu didn't use the dark state, wouldn't he be beaten halfway to death by the enemy? The system inwardly said, "Youngster, I have no other option but to defend us. This Zeus surprisingly desires to strip me from your body. I want to see whether he can do so or not." Li Yunmu had lost consciousness by then, and black chi covered his body from head to toe. Chapter 645, Aries' Strength. "Here we go again. My friend," Odin said with shock-filled eyes. Li Yunmu's activation of the dark state had caused the complexion of people of heavenly gods' council to change slightly, especially that of Zeus. He sensed that stripping that being from the mortal's body was going to be extremely difficult. The youth's strength had undergone a heaven-defying transformation. How could stripping the system from Li Yunmu's body be easy? Li Yunmu in the dark state rushed to attack Zeus without any consciousness. The system had installed a target for attack, and it was Zeus. Capture the leader to capture all the followers. If he could defeat Zeus, then the heavenly gods' council's gods would no longer dare to act impudently. When Li Yunmu's attack was about to hit Zeus, Aries used his pike to parry it. He clenched his teeth, finding it somewhat difficult. Aries was forced to retreat because of Li Yunmu's attack. While gasping for breath, he said to Zeus, this was the reason he was able to resist Hades. Although a glimmer of astonishment flashed in Zeus' gaze, it instantly changed into a glimmer of ruthlessness, and he roared at Aries, "Kill him for me! Such a dangerous person cannot be allowed to exist in the origin world. Otherwise, he will continue giving us trouble and get in the way of our aim to rule the entire origin world." After hearing Zeus' command, Aries was silent for a moment, then he indifferently said, "I fear that it will be somewhat difficult. This mortal's power is like an abyss whose end can't be seen at a glance." Zeus' complexion changed suddenly. Even the most powerful of heavenly gods' council Aries also surprisingly said such words. The level of Li Yunmu's strength was clear from this. Aries was also quite uncertain in his heart regarding this. If he truly attacked the Li Yunmu at that moment, he wasn't certain if he could even take 10 moves. Aries' entire battle intent and strength congealed in his long pike. He hoped to use all of his strength in one attack, hoping to kill Li Yunmu with it. Otherwise, he would be unable to resist the counterattack. Zeus' gaze then fell on Apollo and Artemis, and he furiously bellowed, "You two, assist him! I don't believe that this mortal cannot die." Before he even finished speaking, the light of the sun and the moon descended, shining between him and Aries. Aries' long pike turned into an afterimage and rose into the sky above. It had all of Aries' battle intent and power condensed in it as well as the assistance of Artemis. The next moment, it suddenly descended from the sky filled with the splendor of the sun and the moon. Its terrifying power was congealed from the full strength of 3 gods. Such a deadly attack, how could Li Yunmu resist it with the body of a mortal? At that instant, Zeus was completely certain of winning. "Mortal! This is the punishment for fighting against me. If you hadn't been so unbridled, then perhaps you wouldn't have received the divine punishment." The 3 ancient gods released their power together, which stunned the Scandinavian god council. This time, everything bode ill for the mortal. Odin's eyes also opened widely when he saw the power falling from the sky directly at Li Yunmu's head. It was the divine punishment coming from the fury of the gods. "My friend." Odin wasn't anxious about Li Yunmu rather than being inside his body. But even if he acted at that moment, it would be too late. Li Yunmu was too far from him, so he wouldn't be able to block that attack. Elder brother, the mortal won't be able to survive this attack. Poseidon excitedly said to Zeus. The two gods standing behind him, Dionysus and Hephaestus, also appeared to be somewhat relaxed. They knew that with Artemis and Apollo joining hands with Aries, the mortal would stand no chance. Li Yunmu in his dark state was completely unable to determine the strength of the divine attack about to strike his head. He only felt his body suddenly being suppressed, after which the afterimage of the long pike swallowed him. The snow in the land of ice trembled, and the ice covering the ground began to crack, even forming an enormous ravine. Everyone without exception was shocked by the terrifying power, and the gods of the Scandinavian God Council felt great pity for the mortal. Dying under the hands of three gods joining hands wasn't any injustice toward him. Brunhilde flung her long spear forward, and Athena was instantly blown away. She hoarsely shouted, Li Yunmu. It was the first time that Brunhilde had called out Li Yunmu's name. Previously, due to the divine prestige of her station, she had called him a mortal. But at that moment, she already viewed him on the same level as all the gods of Scandinavia. Although Athena was pushed back, she struck with her sword toward Brunhilde, which she blocked with her long spear. Yet she didn't want to continue the battle before confirming whether Li Yunmu was alive or not. Li Yunmu. She didn't dare to believe that he would sacrifice his life for Scandinavia, but she was unable to accept the reality either. She knew that even her father would be unable to block the attack congealed by the three ancient gods, so how could he, a mortal with a mortal body, be able to resist it? Tears began to fall from Brunhilde's eyes, landing on the long spear. It seemed to sense its master's intense love as well as extreme fury. The long spear's power soared, and it continuously flickered with light as it became much more formidable in Brunhilde's hand. Li Yunmu. Brunhilde, who had always been like a masculine woman, dropped bitter tears on her weapon. You all will certainly die. A golden light suddenly appeared in Brunhilde's gaze, which was the power she had awakened with the long spear. It left the Heavenly Gods Council and Scandinavian God Council dumbstruck. Was that the final state unleashed after complete comprehension of the godly pike? Odin was stupefied. The most formidable strength is the world was the power of love. It could destroy all obstructions and difficulties and pressure everyone around. Zeus was startled while Poseidon was stupefied. They could clearly sense that Brunhilde's power could be considered to be heaven-defying. A hint of anger appeared in Brunhilde's gaze, and she roared, I will take revenge. None of you should hope of running away. I'll kill all of you. While swinging her long spear, she fiercely rushed at Athena. At that moment, the goddess of war and wisdom was far from being her opponent. She promptly raised her golden shield to resist, but as soon as it touched the long spear, it was cleaved in two. Athena's eyes were filled with endless astonishment, following which she was blown away by the godly spear. Whoosh! Li Yunmu's silhouette appeared in front of all the gods from within the smoke. Chapter 646, Closed Eyes and Open Eyes. City Lord. The supreme transcending level experts were still urging Lin Yuero, but since had made her decision, no one could change her mind. She took out the long sword hanging at her waist and rushed toward the senior blocking the bridge. She constantly waved her long sword which transformed into a few after mirages as she poured all her battle intent and focus into her weapon. Although she was unable to shake up the senior, at least she also wouldn't be hit by him and lose complete superiority. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A few sword shadows flitted past the elder's body, but he did not try to evade in the slightest. Instead he nimbly moved his hands to constantly clash with the long sword, even causing sparks to fly. With his eyes still closed, the senior slammed his fist against the bridge. Although its stunning power wasn't sufficient to cause the bridge to collapse, it was enough to destabilize Lin Yuero. Just as she was thinking of stabilizing herself, another fierce tremor ran through the bridge. She lost balance, and cold sweat began to pour down her forehead as her body tottered on the verge of collapse. If she fell into the magma or ice hell underneath, she would definitely die a horrible death. Lin Yuero promptly jumped into the sky so the shaking of the bridge would have no relation to her. While the supreme transcending level experts were in cold sweat from seeing her about to fall off the bridge, she withdrew and took a deep breath. The senior with his eyes still closed also stopped moving at that moment. City Lord, did you discover anything? Lin Yuero shook her head and said, while battling him, I was trying to test whether I can stop him from attacking me. I understand one thing clearly now, and that is that he won't take the initiative to attack. But as long as we enter his attack range, he will certainly attack. The supreme transcending level experts couldn't help but exclaim in astonishment, what exactly is this person thinking? Why doesn't he take the initiative to attack? Lin Yuero shook her head, then lifted her sword to rush towards the senior once more. If they were unable to get past him, they wouldn't be able to pass this layer. What did Illusion God's words mean? Every layer was a different sort of test, so what exactly did this layer test? Why did they need to fight one by one? Because the bridge was truly narrow, if they wanted to pass, they could only pass one by one, and they also couldn't join hands to defeat the old man. After all, if they were even the slightest bit careless, it was highly possible that they would drop into the magma or ice hell. What should we do exactly? How do we clear this layer? The illusion god was still busy playing chess. He caressed his beard and laughed to himself. Girl, have you encountered difficulty in this layer? Not everyone has good luck. Previously, your luck had been good, but you won't be able to pass this layer. Lin Yuero's fight with the senior ended exactly the same, without the slightest change. This old man seems to be extremely familiar with each of our offensive styles. He has already memorized our attacks, so even if we continue fighting him, we won't be able to win. All of the supreme transcending level experts were anxious. Then are we truly trapped here? What happens if Lucky Wind City is attacked from all sides while we are stuck here? Without our support, the city would be in great peril. Lin Yuero was also very anxious, but she couldn't do anything. She had to clear this layer, for only then could they advance to the next one. Since she had chosen to enter this mythical realm, she couldn't regret her choice. He should be the legendary H.A.C.K, so defeating him is extremely difficult. He won't take the initiative to attack, and all his attacks are defensive in nature. Destroying this sort of indestructible defense is extremely difficult. Then why don't we attack him together? Even if he is extremely powerful, he can only react to one person's attack. If so many of us attack together, he won't have the time to defend against each of our attacks. But what about the surrounding ice and magma hells? What if we fell down? Our goal right now is to overpower this H.A.C.K, so even if there are some sacrifices, we have to be willing to accept that. City Lord, gives us the command, and we will attack together. Lin Yuero was somewhat hesitant. What sort of test was it exactly? Unity? Coordination? Her eyes shone fiercely, and her lips bent to form an arc. So this layer can be broken like this. I have already discovered this H.A.C.K's weakness. Lin Yuero said with a slight smile. Hearing her words that H.A.C.K had some weakness, the supreme transcending level experts were astonished. Were her words true? Had she really found a way to defeat H.A.C.K? This bridge can only hold one person, so we should arrange ourselves in a row. We should attack this H.A.C.K once and retreat, which would cause his memory to be in disorder. Then, we will find the opportunity to defeat him. If we went one by one to fight against him, he would unleash the defense based on memory of our attacks, and none of us would be able to defeat him. Upon hearing Lin Yuero's words, the eyes of the supreme transcending level experts shone brightly. If they could defeat H.A.C.K without losing anyone from their squad, it would of course be the best. After that, all the supreme transcending experts arranged themselves on the bridge. Then, one of them attacked the H.A.C.K once and retreated while the second person took his position. Sure enough, as Lin Yuero had said, A.K.K.La's memory defense was broken by this strategy. Because of the chaos in his mind, A.K.K.La was unable to defend properly. The illusion god was slightly startled. This girl, she could even discover this weakness. It was truly not simple. He took a deep breath. Seems like I have to make this A.K.K.La use his ultimate trick. The supreme transcending level experts thought that A.K.K.La had already been defeated by them. Who could have expected, however, that he would suddenly open his eyes and send the supreme transcending level experts flying away? The eyes of the supreme transcending level experts filled with astonishment. Wasn't A.K.K.La only supposed to defend and not attack? Lin Yuero was also startled. This was her negligence, she had forgotten that A.K.K.La's eyes had been closed until then. She should have expected that when he opened his eyes, his formidable might would definitely become more powerful. The formation of the supreme transcending level experts was broken. Lin Yuero tightly clenched her fists and said while gnashing her teeth, I always felt that the illusion god was scheming. How should this open-eyed A.K.K.La be dealt with? Illusion god began to laugh heartily. Girl, have you exhausted your abilities? This should be considered my win. If you remain in the mythical realm, it should be quite interesting. Maybe you can help me create a stronger mythical realm. Chapter 647, Counterattack. All the gods were stunned. Li Yunmu was surprisingly still alive. How could he act like nothing had happened after blocking Aries, who was a war god, attack? It was impossible. Wasn't it an illusion? Zeus and Poseidon were dumbstruck. How could the power congealed by three gods have no effect on the mortal? What exactly was going on there? The smoke gradually dissipated, and Li Yunmu's body, which had been hidden by it, finally appeared in front of everyone. There was still the same strange smile on his face, but a golden armor now covered his body. Could that golden armor have saved him? He looked like Hell's emissary at that moment. War god Aries, sun god Apollo, and moon goddess Artemis were startled. They could not understand how the mortal could perfectly block an attack which contained the combined strength of the three of them. Unless, he was truly the devil from hell. Only devils could possibly draw a tie against gods. Moreover, the strength of devils was certainly on a higher level compared to gods. Brunhilde looked at Li Yunmu, who seemed to have come from hell, and instantly the tears in her eyes stopped. As long as nothing happened to Li Yunmu, then regardless of whatever appearance he had, she would be extremely happy. The dark state wasn't Li Yunmu's original appearance, and it had appeared only after the system had occupied his consciousness. Brunhilde's gaze turned extremely ruthless, and she glowered at Athena. You aren't my opponent. Let your father Zeus battle with me, she bellowed. Athena, who had been blown far away, was gasping for breath. In terms of brute force, she was naturally not as robust as the Valkyrie. But in terms of wisdom, she was even known as the goddess of war and wisdom, so naturally she could defeat Brunhilde in strategy and tactics. Good, you can defeat me, but isn't that all because of the long spear in your hand? Can you let me take a look at it? Athena looked at Brunhilde's dazzling long spear, and a cunning expression appeared on her face. Brunhilde coldly snorted. I am afraid that you won't be able to receive it. She threw the long spear at Athena and suspended it in the air. But regardless of how much power Athena used, she was unable to shake the long spear. She took a deep breath, and at that moment she realized that all Scandinavian weapons recognized their master. If someone else other than their master tried to wield them, it would be extremely difficult. Thor's Mjolnir was also the same. Only he could lift his hammer while others were unable to hold it. On the other side, Thor was using Mjolnir to beat Loki until he spat blood. At that moment, Loki was forcefully brought in front of Odin. Ha 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 ha! Blood trickled down from Loki's mouth. He was constantly howling with laughter at Odin. You aren't suited to be Scandinavia's king. I should be the king of Scandinavia. I would lead it to conquer this world instead of constantly defending this corner like you, he shrieked. Hearing the discontent in Loki's voice, Odin slapped his face, almost blowing him away. He again spat out blood and fell on the ground. He looked at Odin's dignified complexion, but he was still unconvinced. Why was he being punished? Wasn't he also thinking about Scandinavia's future? If thou were suitable to be the king, why would you push Scandinavia into battle? Is this the so-called way of the king? Thou aren't even suitable to be a Scandinavian. You're betrayed your motherland, betrayed your family, thou have truly shamed Scandinavia. Odin's words were like a stab of a knife in Loki's heart, and he gnashed his teeth. So what if I betrayed them? All of this was to replace an incompetent king like you. Shut your mouth. Thor also slapped Loki and then said, can't you see? Sister and that mortal who has already become Scandinavia's son-in-law, all of them are fighting. And what about you? Without even contributing anything to Scandinavia, you are simply unsatisfied with father's rule. Loki was rendered unconscious by the slaps. All the gods of Scandinavia were looking furiously at him, clearly hating the traitor. In their eyes, the mortal who had married Brunhilde was much more worthy of their respect. He was battling with the heavenly gods' council to protect Scandinavia and had even blocked the combined attack of 3 gods. When he possessed such terrifying strength, how could they not respect and admire him? If Scandinavia somehow survived that catastrophe, Odin would definitely allow Lee Yunmu to enter the ranks of gods. When war god Aries saw Lee Yunmu gradually advance in his direction, his complexion instantly changed. He had used his entire strength in the attack just then, and the devil was surprisingly still unhurt. Now even if he used some tricks, wouldn't they all be easily ignored? Apollo and Artemis retreated. It was clear that they could also sense the slow approaching danger. When Zeus and Poseidon saw the 3 gods backing together, they had to act personally. Zeus' blue eyes suddenly turned completely vacant and thunderous clouds began to surge in the sky. Countless thunderbolts descended from the sky on Lee Yunmu. On the other side, the Emperor of Sea Poseidon converted the surrounding ice and snow into a tsunami that surged forth at the youth. 2 powerful ancient gods of the heavenly gods' council attacked like the hot wind of hell. But Lee Yunmu seemed to have lost his soul, and his complexion was chilling. He didn't feel intimidated in the slightest in front of the powerful attacks of the 2 ancient gods. His body gradually hid in the darkness while the cyan divine blade in his hand turned into countless afterimages. His black pupils were completely swallowed by darkness. Warning! The dark state will only last for 5 more minutes. Requesting host to finish the battle quickly. Lee Yunmu remained aloof after hearing the system's warning and crazily howled with laughter. All of you die for me. Drop dead. Dark quantum explosion strike. This was the only skill he could use after activating the dark state. Heaven and earth suddenly changed and were completely covered by darkness, just like when he had fought with the king of hell Hades and had absorbed most of Hades' strength. At that moment, the entire world turned completely dark. The afterimages of the cyan divine blade were also covered by a layer of black chi. With this formidable strength of the dark state, even if the opponent was an ancient god, they were similar to ants in front of Lee Yunmu. Boom! The afterimages turned into waves of darkness that rushed toward the thunderbolts descending from the sky and the tsunami charging at him from the ground. Upon impact, all of them were instantly dissolved. Chapter 648, Second Plan. Lee Yunmu had lost himself in the dark state, and like a crazy devil, he started attacking the 2 ancient god-level powerhouses. His body erupted with formidable power and created countless aftermirages, which rotated around the 2 ancient gods. Gradually, he swallowed them into the dark space. Zeus and Poseidon had never eaten such a big loss. The trident in Poseidon's hand became unstable, and he said to Zeus while shivering from head to toe, "He has absorbed Hades' strength." When comparing proficiency with the dark attribute, Lee Yunmu was clearly more formidable than Hades. Therefore, him having absorbed Hades' strength was quite reasonable. When he had dealt with Hades, his strength was already formidable. But at that moment, after having absorbing Hades' power, he had become even more powerful. A wave of dark energy fluctuation could be seen in the sky. It was constantly spreading, and the Heavenly Gods' Council was blown away by it. Heavenly Gods' Council was endlessly surprised. How terrifying was the mortal's strength! How could he force the entire Heavenly Gods' Council to retreat by himself? Before Athena was able to reach the long spear, she was forced back a great distance by Li Yunmu's energy fluctuation. As Brunhilde promptly retrieved her long spear, she also sensed the land of ice being flipped over by Li Yunmu in his dark state. At that moment, he raised the divine cyan blade and suddenly struck toward Zeus and Poseidon without caring for the shocked expressions of the others. The system's reminder reached him then. The time for the dark state has concluded. The dark chi enveloping Li Yunmu's body quickly dissipated, and the dark space made by him just a moment ago shattered instantly. Li Yunmu's body gently fell to the ground with the divine cyan blade landing by his side. The panicked Zeus and Poseidon were both shocked. Could it be that the devil had left his body? But after Li Yunmu's rampage, the majority of Heavenly Gods' Council had suffered injuries. If they clashed with the Scandinavian God Council at such a state, they would definitely suffer a loss. Zeus looked at the fainted Li Yunmu and promptly stated, "We will leave Scandinavia, but don't think that we have given up. From this day onwards, Heavenly Gods' Council and Scandinavia cannot exist under the same sky." With the clouds and mist, Zeus's Heavenly Gods' Council disappeared from the northern land of ice. The Scandinavian God Council relaxed. The people of Heavenly Gods' Council had left after being snubbed. When Loki, who was gasping for breath while lying on the ground, discovered that the Heavenly Gods' Council couldn't even defeat a mortal, he couldn't help but feel regret over his stupid choice. He had never expected that his sister's mortal husband was formidable to the extent of raising anyone's hackles. Even his father Odin might not possess the ability to force the Heavenly Gods' Council to retreat, but Li Yunmu had accomplished that. The Scandinavian Gods' Council considered Li Yunmu as Scandinavia's hero, but Odin was completely clear in his heart that all this was closely related to the being residing in the mortal's body. Fortunately, their Scandinavia possessed such a trump card, otherwise, they would have been exterminated. Brunhilde quickly supported Li Yunmu up. This time, he would probably hibernate for a long time. As his wife, it was her responsibility to look after him until he awakened. The system inside Li Yunmu's body sighed. So this youngster still made this choice. I don't know whether he is a fool or what. Fortunately I had a plan B, or else we would have definitely been conned by this youngster. At this time, Sleipnir returned to Scandinavia, holding something in his mouth. He came in front of unconscious Li Yunmu and respectfully said, "Lord, the matter you entrusted to me has been accomplished successful. This is the object you wanted." Brunhilde was slightly startled. "Sleipnir? You assisted this being in handling something?" "Yes. Madame Valkyrie. Since the mortal decided to fight together with Scandinavia, Lord instructed me to do this matter." Brunhilde was some gratified. She also hadn't expected for Li Yunmu to suddenly stand on Scandinavia's side. Actually, he still wasn't formally accepted as a member of Scandinavia, but not only had he willingly staked his life, he had also become everyone's hero. Even she as a Valkyrie also felt inferior to him. The system looked at the secret genetic code and said with a faint smile, "This toy has finally returned to its original owner. Now I can rule the entire origin world at ease. Girl, help me hide it carefully. Until this youngster awakens, don't show it to anyone." Although Brunhilde didn't know the meaning behind the system's words, she still followed its instructions and hid the box with the secret genetic code. "Li Yunmu, when will he awaken? Why are you so impatient about finishing the wedding with him?" the system teased her. Brunhilde's face flushed red. She inserted her long spear into the ground and coldly said, "I am a grand Valkyrie, and being married to me is his good fortune. Now can you awaken him a little sooner?" The system shook its head. "I am afraid that it's impossible." This time, he used much more strength compared to last time, so his recovery will also be slower than before. Disappointment surfaced on Brunhilde's face. She looked at the unconscious Li Yunmu and couldn't help but shake her head and sigh. After the Heavenly Gods' Council returned to Whale City, most of them still had a shadow of Li Yunmu in their hearts. They had used their full strength to return quickly, away from that excessively tyrannical young mortal. They hadn't expected him to be so powerful, which made them feel helpless. No one in the Heavenly Gods' Council could battle him, so as long as Scandinavia had him, other powers of the origin world wouldn't dare to provoke it. Zeus's gaze was turned somewhat dim. Not only did the resentment for Hades being injured hadn't been eliminated, but the Heavenly Gods' Council had suffered even more injuries. It was the first time their ancient god-level powerhouses faced such a powerful enemy. Hades hadn't awakened yet and was still lying unconscious. At this time, Dionysus suddenly rushed to Zeus. Not good. King, the secret genetic code box was stolen by someone. What? Who was it? Zeus suddenly stood up from the king's seat. Who would have thought that after the Whale City went out with full force, someone would take the opportunity of them being away to steal inside? I don't know. Hades still hasn't awakened. The mortals of Whale City have been negligent in protecting the city and thus someone was able to intrude. What should we do now? Zeus was furious. The secret genetic code is the key to ruling the origin world. Bastard, regardless of whoever you are, you will return it to me. Chapter 649, Weak Point. Akela, after opening his eyes, was completely different from when his eyes were closed. The close-eyed Akela only defended and wouldn't attack. But after opening his eyes, instead of defending, he only focused on attacking. In the first round against him, all the supreme transcending experts were forced back by his fierce offensive. They sunk into desperate straits. Their physical strength consumption had become extremely grave. If Linuero couldn't find a way to break the deadlock, they could only stake it all, but given their weary condition, they were more than likely to make a mistake. Pea-sized drops of cold sweat were pouring down Linuero's forehead. The supreme transcending experts were trying their hardest, but they seemed to have encountered an insurmountable wall in the fourth layer of the mythical realm, like encountering a bottleneck in cultivation. Illusion God indifferently smiled and persuaded Linuero, "Girl, you can still choose to abandon this quest. It is impossible for you to clear this fourth layer of the mythical realm. No one had even been able to reach it, so all of you seeing it can already be considered terrific. You don't need to struggle. Obediently become my servants in this mythical realm." Linuero was still heavily perspiring, but she couldn't find any weakness in Akela's offensive. Trying to create disorder in its defense was very easy, but breaking his assault was extremely difficult. The defending party was always passive because they kept guessing about what trick would the attacker use next. But the attacker was always the one taking initiative, so it was quite impossible to break the attacker's rhythm by relying on defense alone. The supreme transcending level experts had toppled on the ground after exhausting their strength. Looking at the indestructible Akela, their morale had been completely crushed, and they were about to give in to despair. Linuero raised the sword in her hand and thought to herself, "Seems like I will have to break Akela's offensive by myself." When Akela had its eyes closed, he appeared to be very heavy. But as soon as he opened his eyes, he became extremely nimble, using tricks that made him basically impossible to defeat. Linuero suddenly thought of the cultivation method Li Yunmu had imparted to her. There was a particular path in it which she had been unable to train regardless of how hard she tried. She felt that it was because her cultivation wasn't sufficient, but it now seemed that she had been stuck at a bottleneck. The method to breakthrough had been taught to her by Li Yunmu previously, and he said that she should enter dire straits. Thus, she began to clash with Akela again and again. She was repeatedly forced back while continuously spitting out blood. The supreme transcending level experts, who had fallen on the ground, saw Linuero stake her life and were completely astonished. "City Lord! You must be careful. Lin Yuero didn't hear their advice, since her complete focus was on defending against Akila's offense. In the end though, she was almost blown away from the bridge by a punch. If she fell into the magma or ice hell, she would definitely die a horrible death. I finally know how to defeat you. A fierce light shone in Lin Yuero's eyes. At that moment, Akila stopped his attack while the supreme transcending level experts looked at each other in excitement. She had so quickly discovered the method to break this layer. She was worthy of being their city lord. Their belief in her wasn't misplaced. If she was with them, then regardless of how difficult the situation was, nothing would be impossible to survive. Lin Yuero took a deep breath and sensed the energy continuously bubbling forth from her dantian. She knew that because of the dire straits, she had finally broken through the bottleneck. The strength of her sword rapidly increased. As long as her attack hit, Akila would completely disappear from the mythical realm. Who knew whether he had also been turned into a servant of the mythical realm after entering? Illusion God twirled his beard and looked at the scene in the mythical realm. He felt that Lin Yuero was only putting up a brave front. She was unable to continue battling, so what trick could she pull off now? Illusion God turned his back and said with a slight smile, "Seems like it's finished." Indeed, it was finished, since the sword in Lin Yuero's hand had already impaled Akila. The long sword had pierced his waist. Akila, who had always been like an unbroken diamond, had actually been impaled. All the supreme transcending level experts were dumbstruck. They heard Akila's muffled groan, followed by a boom sound of an explosion. The entire mythical realm seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The illusion god was shell-shocked and couldn't help but say in astonishment, she surprisingly discovered Akila's weak point. Lin Yuero had noticed long ago that Akila always relied on turning at the waist to produce formidable might. His defense also relied almost entirely upon his waist. Therefore, when he switched from defense to offense, he overlooked the defense of his waist. This was Akila's weak point. Lin Yuero pulled back the sword and cupped her first in the other hand. "Senior, thanks for letting me win. Now, can you allow us to advance to the 5th layer?" Illusion God was still silent from his astonishment. After hearing Lin Yuero's words, he finally managed to react. He took a deep breath and said, "Truly unexpected. You, girl, can enter the 5th layer. Girl, you will be the first person to enter the 5th layer of my mythical realm. Each layer of this mythical layer contains a different test. The 4th layer was the test of unity and solidarity, right?" Illusion God burst out laughing heartily. "You have certainly not disappointed me. I hope you can show such performance in the 5th layer as well. But I want to change the condition of our bet for the 5th layer." "What do you mean?" Lin Yuero couldn't help but knit her brows. Didn't this mean that Illusion God didn't mean to keep his promise? What if he intended to keep them trapped inside the mythical realm instead of allowing them to leave? "I wish for you to enter final layer alone. Others cannot go with you. If you can clear the 5th layer, I will release you all of you and also give you a treasure. If you are unable to clear the 5th layer of my mythical realm, you will all lose and have to stay inside my mythical realm." Lin Yuero hesitated after hearing the condition. She couldn't involve others in her gamble. "I am not willing. You have to release others. If you want to penalize anyone, then punish me alone." Chapter 650, The Final Test. When Lin Yuero took the initiative to bear all responsibility, the illusion god could detect a hint of resoluteness in her gaze. Wasn't this the reason she was able to receive everyone's respect in Lucky Wind City so quickly? "City Lord. It doesn't matter. We believe you." The supreme transcending level experts entrusted everything to Lin Yuero. They had experienced all sorts of life or death battles in the mythical realm and were like locusts tied to one rope. Regardless of whatever the conclusion was, they were all delighted to share it. "City Lord, you don't need to feel pressured. It really doesn't matter. You just need to focus your attention on clearing the mythical realm without caring about us." Upon hearing the words of all the supreme transcending level experts, Lin Yuero suddenly felt quite uncomfortable. Her gaze flickered left and right. With everyone trusting her to this extent, she naturally couldn't fail to live up to their expectations. Girl, I am sorry to inform you, but only one person can enter the 5th layer, so only you can enter the 5th layer as the representative of your people. If you cannot pass it, then I will keep all of you in the mythical realm as servants. This has been a regulation for a long time. Lin Yuero was a very responsible person. The illusion god could see that, but the mythical realm had its own rules, and he definitely couldn't break them. Lin Yuero took a deep breath after hearing that. Since the illusion god had said so much, what could she say to counter it? If he said that only one person could enter, then she would become everyone's hope to leave the mythical realm. Alright. But I still request that if I don't clear the mythical realm that you only penalize me. I will agree to any of your requests, but I want you to release them. After hearing Lin Yuero still speaking in their support, the supreme transcending level experts were extremely moved. Apart from Li Yunmu, no one had treated them so well. The illusion god saw Lin Yuero persistence and couldn't help but exclaim, "Girl, why are you bothering with them? If you remain inside the mythical realm, I will naturally be very excited, but I would still hate to part with such fine servants. If you aren't willing, then I won't enter the 5th layer. In any case, since I have already cleared the first 4 layers, then even if I don't continue to the 5th layer, you cannot regard this as me leaving the mythical realm midway. You cannot keep us trapped here as servants." Lin Yuero indifferently said /. The illusion god sighed and said while waving his hand, all right. If you really care so much about them, I will agree with you. But you also said just now that you would agree to any of my requests." The malicious gaze of the illusion god aimed at Lin Yuero sent an involuntarily quiver up her body. The illusion god was so old he shouldn't have any unique desires, right? Lin Yuero suddenly began to slightly regret promising the old man a request. But her words had always been worth 9 sacred tripods. Since she had already said it, she would naturally follow through. She promptly said, "Senior, I still haven't charged into the 5th layer. Don't you think that it is a little premature to make your request?" The illusion god began to laugh heartily and said, "You are quite right. Then I invite you to enter the 5th layer." The first 4 layers weren't difficult, but the 5th one contains the essence of this mythical realm. Even this old man was unable to clear the 5th layer, which is the reason I became the illusion god. Girl, if you can clear the 5th layer, then this old man will kowtow to you. In the future, if you want anything from me, I will definitely appear. Naturally, I will also send you off with a gift." Based on the illusion god's excited appearance, Lin Yuero didn't know whether he hoped for her to not clear the 5th layer or to clear it. In the end, she nodded and said, "Begin. I am already prepared, so senior, do not disappoint me." The illusion god waved his hands and Lin Yuero disappeared from the 4th realm. This caused the supreme transcending level experts who had come with her to become nervous. If their city lord truly couldn't clear the 5th layer, she would be eternally trapped in the mythical realm. Then who would Lucky Wind City rely upon to protect itself? Without Lin Yuero, it would be in a perilous situation. If Ling Shuang had been around, it would still have been all right. But unfortunately, that stubborn woman had chosen to pursue her own goal in the end. The illusion god couldn't help but mutter while playing chess with himself, "I hope that this girl won't disappoint me. Otherwise, she will be the same as me, playing chess here alone. But seeing her performance in the last 4 layers, she shouldn't disappoint me." Lin Yuero gradually opened her eyes and found herself in a place which resembled the 1st layer. Endless darkness covered the entire region like a sealed black space. She faintly knitted her eyebrows and couldn't help but speak out. "Don't tell me that this is the 5th layer which illusion god was speaking about? But there's nothing in here," she constantly inquired. "Senior, is this the 5th layer?" But she didn't obtain any reply. She seemed to have been transported to a sealed space. The first 4 layers had tested a specific virtue, but in the 5th layer, apart from the endless darkness, there was nothing around. Could it be a hint? Lin Yuero tested the same method which she had used to clear the first layer and tried to illuminate the dark space. But after testing it a few times, she gave up on that idea. That was because there was absolutely no relation between the first layer and the 5th layer. For the time being, she still couldn't understand what exactly was the significance of the dark space. Lin Yuero pondered about the few clues provided by the illusion god. He had said that he was unable to clear the 5th layer, which meant that it didn't have any flaws. It was a perfect mythical realm. But Lin Yuero did not believe that the world had any perfect stuff. In her mind, all entities possessed weak points and flaws. There is certainly a way to escape this place. Lin Yuero cheered herself in her heart. Then, she began to carefully investigate the surrounding environment. The endless darkness was like an abyss whose end couldn't be seen. Lin Yuero felt like she was looking at the center of it. When she was gazing at the abyss was also gazing at her. The feeling she had was that everything seemed to have been swallowed by the darkness. And she felt a hint of fear toward it, like she was being completely stifled by it. Perhaps this was the reason why humans disliked darkness.